Okay, so we're live. You guys can start whenever you're ready.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear me. Welcome to our presentation titled High Five, Exploding Across the Metaverse, 5 years of VR Exploders series. My name is Marie Vans, also known as amvans lapis in most virtual worlds, including Second Life. I am an associate professor in the Department of Systems Engineering at Colorado State University, the other CSU. And I'm also an adjunct faculty at the San Jose State University iSchool, where I teach a course on virtual environments for teaching and learning. I have been involved with the iSchool's Virtual Island and Second Life Vicara since 2015 as a student in the MLIS program. And I'm joined here today by my colleague, Bethany Winslow, who is Director of Online Learning at San Jose State University iSchool. She is the director of the iSchool's Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration, mostly known as Vicara, and she's been involved with the Vicara since 2017. She's also the creator of Mozilla Hub's initiative, the iSchool initiative. So here's the outline for our presentation today. We'll begin with where is the metaverse? And this is the background to set the stage for the VR Exploders Club mission. Then we'll talk about the VR Exploders Club, briefly covering how it came about and previous research. Then we'll cover Exploders Research 2023, an analysis of the newly developed survey that was based on the lessons learned from the previous year. And we'll talk about plans for going forward in 2024, and finally, how you can get involved if you aren't already. I also want to mention that in September, we are planning a VR Exploders celebration of 5 years event. Yes, the VR Exploders Club has been around for 5 years this year, and we're still going strong. Also, at the end of the presentation, we can give you a URL for adding your name to the Exploders Club distribution list. You can also get it from the treasure chest in front of me. If you are interested in joining us, please either fill out that form, or I am Bethany or myself, and we will contact you. Okay, so first up, where is the metaverse? You could talk to 100 different people and get 100 different answers. Last year, we presented some data collected by Metaverse.com, which seemed to be tracking many of the platforms. We're going to present some of those here, along with some interesting developments that have occurred over the past year. Okay, so last year we presented this graphic from Metaverse Consulting Company. We pointed out that the 3 biggest platforms were used by kids, tweens, and teens, including Fortnite, Minecraft, and Roblox. We also noted that according to SearchLogix, which is a search engine optimization company, Minecraft, one of the older games, is still popular today precisely because of the creative and social aspects. You can build and hang out with friends while doing so. They report that younger players still dominate the Minecraft servers. People want to collaborate with others. The social aspect and the creative building aspect, I think, is key. So here is the URL to that particular site that I mentioned. Now, this graph these are reporting on exactly the same platforms, but you will see that in 1 year, Fortnite increased from 83 million to 90 million, which is an 8% increase. Minecraft decreased a little bit, but has been pretty stable between 160 and 174 million from between 2022 and 2024. While Roblox, the real winner, went from 202 million last year to 250 million this year, a whopping 20% increase in 1 year. Together, the 3 platforms see a monthly active user engagement of 505 million. by the under 19 demographic. Okay, and that's 52% larger than the entire population of the United States. That's just to give you an idea. But by contrast, Second Life has monthly active users engagement of about 1 million, and this number has also remained pretty stable. However, for comparison, this number represents 0.03%, a third of the population, a third of a percent of the population of the US. So the other thing I wanted to point out about Second Life users is that based on what James Au pointed out in his blog 6 years ago, he said that the last time Linden Labs reported SL user demographics in 2008, 15% of the population were over 45 and 23% were between 35 and 45 in age. 10 years later, any of those users who are still in Second Life, and remember this is 5 years ago, the Second Life users are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s and 80s. He goes on to say that the reality is a small but significant percentage are sadly going to pass away every year. And there's a link to that blog. Now, as we pointed out last year, the real information that needs attention is the fact that the target audience here at VWBPE are staff, students, and faculty at educational institutions, and that while we might not care now about the hundreds of millions playing Fortnite, Roblox, and Minecraft, eventually, and because we are all really old enough to know that kids grow up in a heartbeat, they will be the target group for us. Now, we believe that by understanding the platforms and the kids the platforms that kids are using today will help us to build learning experiences that those same kids will expect to be using in the future. So this graph shows monthly active users for VR-enabled virtual worlds, and you'll notice that we have visited over the past 5 years together as part of the VR Exploders Club are pointed out in the blue with the blue arrows. In fact, many of the platforms we have visited show up here, but they fall under the 500,000 monthly active users like Sansar, Frame, and Glue. Again, the number of monthly users seems to be very low compared to the ones we showed on the other side. And I want to reiterate that these places might have desktop versions. However, the affordances of those platforms don't approach what's available in non-VR platforms. And VR chat is probably the most popular of the VR virtual worlds, and the ability to create interactive experiences for free, but mostly using Unity, and the availability of shareable content makes this a leading platform. Now, in 2024, AltSpace is gone, and I'd like to point out that it had more users at the time, 1.2 million, than Second Life when it closed down. And another major platform that will shut down this year is Mozilla Hubs, but I'm going to let Bethany talk more about that. Okay, so the next set of slides show various worlds by genre and age group. This is part of the Metaverse radar. The red dots are older worlds, and which are basically non-blockchain or cryptocurrency worlds, and the blue are blockchain worlds. Now, interestingly, I would argue that some of these are misclassified. So an obvious one here is that I don't think science-based belongs in the teenagers group, but you can argue with me on that one. So UGC stands for user generated content. So Second Life is actually showing up here, as is Open Simulator with the blue arrows. It's very interesting here also is that education/culture genre is so very sparse. I would argue that that's because educators use many different platforms due to the various affordances available on them, and that creating a metaverse educational platform from the ground up is not going to be very profitable or exciting. Engage VR is a good example of a platform that started out specifically for education and pivoted pretty quickly to enterprise. They realized they couldn't make any money. So open worlds are defined as virtual worlds where users can freely roam throughout virtual environments, as opposed to worlds with more linear and structured gameplay. They are often with open worlds, there are multiple use cases or avatar activities as opposed to focusing on one specific vertical. So some examples of the popular virtual worlds here are Nemesis and Viveverse, both of which I have never heard of. But these apparently encourage users to explore their environments, something that I'm sure Second Life doesn't do. And they contain a lot of gamification and lots of events to join and enjoy, and a very large focus on social interaction. That's all a big quote there. But notice that Somnium Space and Decentraland are in that genre. Okay, so MAAS stands for Metaverse as a Service. You'll notice that Engage VR and Glue are in this genre. Metaverse as a Service is defined by Metaverse.consulting as platforms that are virtual worlds offering companies and businesses the ability to create standalone, custom, or bespoke virtual worlds. Now, while they tout the idea that this is cost effective, quote unquote, this is not going to be the case for educators. What I find interesting about this graphic is that most of the MAAS platforms are not blockchain worlds. Okay, so finally, you may remember that we presented this slide back in 2020, which was from an organization composed of several XR companies for tracking all the Metaverse platforms. Only back then it wasn't really called Metaverse, because Metaverse was the word for 2022. To demonstrate the volatility of this area, many of the platforms on this circle have already closed. I'm sure you probably can't even see it, but so some of them in there are Roomy, Spaces, and AltSpace. But recently, I went to look for an updated image of this, and here's what I found at the URL where I originally got it, which is xrcollaboration.com. The arrow at the top right points directly to a post on Catch a Cheater. And recent posts include important information such as how to check boyfriend's Facebook messages without getting caught, and gut feeling he's cheating, but you have no proof, 8 signs he's cheating on you. So clearly, someone else bought this domain, and the other organization no longer exists. In fact, what I did is I checked the Wayback Machine, and the switch occurred sometime between March 15 and April 29th of 2023. And the last time that industry landscape graphic was generated was 2021. So I think this demonstrates that the metaverse is volatile and hard to keep tabs on, to be honest. Okay, so this just goes into what is the VR Exploders Club, and you know, basically we are interested in the metaverse for education. The VR Exploders Club itself has evolved over the past 5 years, and we will cover some highlights and insights that we have collected over that time. For those who don't know, the VR Exploders Club started in 2019 with the Vicara team from the SJSU iSchool as a way to check out what was going on in the metaverse, although again, we didn't call it that at the time. At the March 2020 VWBPE, we presented our very first survey findings on what the wants versus what the needs were. Educators were comfortable delivering educational content in virtual reality platforms. The VR Exploders Club emerged from this. We started in Sansar because at the time Linden Labs owned it, and we really weren't aware of other platforms. Very quickly, however, we discovered other spaces like AltSpace and Frame VR, and decided we should know what they were. So here is the survey that we ran in 2019 it identified 8 criteria that educators need if they're going to effectively deliver educational experiences in these spaces. The criteria included voice, the ability to communicate in speech in world, both publicly and privately. For example, voice chat and presentations. Support for real-time presentations, for example, sharing a desktop in world or having a slide presentation object that allows synchronous presentation to be visible. Onboarding experience has to be easy coming in the learning and in learning curve on functionality, how to create and modify an avatar. Griefer handling, there needs to be a protocol in place for harassment. Videos and some kind of multimedia functionality, which basically being able to take record of events and experiences either from within the virtual world or using third-party tools. Having desktop VR access and as opposed to just having to have headsets, the ability to teleport to different geographic locations and make it an easy way to do that. And finally, having a way to do some cross-platform collaboration or interaction. Basically, this means that people who are in headsets should be able to collaborate with people who are not in headsets. We presented, so armed with the result of the survey, we started running monthly field trips specifically to determine if they met this set of criteria identified. And we asked explorers to fill out a very simple field notes survey at the end of each field trip. And after analyzing those, we created both a new 5-question survey for explorers as well as a general survey, which was sent out to the entire explorers distribution list. So this chart is just one question, probably the most important question that we got out of that general survey, which concerns the platforms that are most often used by educators who responded. Out of the explorers list, about 15% responded to it. So we presented this last year, but wanted to remind you that Second Life was the most popular, and that as a result of the general survey, we changed the VR Explorers Club survey significantly for 2023. And we will be presenting those results after a quick tour through our 2023 VR Explorers field trips. So now we'll talk about the field trips in the past year. And while we are not able to visit a different platform every month in 2023, we did get out there 9 times. We have several die-hard exploders who come every time, and typically those are between 5 and 9 exploders on every trip. So the first place we went in January last year, we visited Altspace because we knew it would be the last time we could do a VR Exploders Club field trip before it closed down in March. We spent a lot of time in my home playing with interactables such as snowballs and fireworks, and we also found a nice pub towards the end of the hour. In February, we went to Spatial.io, an up-and-coming browser-based web XR platform. Incidentally, this may be the platform to move all your Mozilla Hubs rooms to. I have encouraged my students who have built Mozilla Hubs rooms to move them here. Okay, then we went in March to Sansar. As you'll see, Sansar was not the easiest platform to use. However, it can be very interactive. Scurrylandia is a quest which we didn't finish, but I believe James did, and there are many nausea-inducing amusement rides available in one spot. In April, we went to Minetest, a Minecraft world not associated with Microsoft. People had some issues getting into Minetest initially, but this was due to the fact that this is a platform used by kids, and extra security is required. Okay, so in May, we went back to Somnium Space, and things had changed a lot, including the ability to interact with some of the web displays like media. It's like media on a prim. That's what these pictures, a lot of these pictures are for. But in general, this was a difficult platform to deal with, and there was not much there in terms of educational content. Okay, so in July, we went to a new world, a hyper world. Okay, this one was fun because it's so easily to accidentally delete the floor, causing everyone to fall. Content creation is easy once you get the hang of it, but logical permissions are really lacking here, hence being able to delete the floor multiple times. In August, we went to Rec Room. We've been there before, but we went to different places this time. Rec Room is huge, is a hugely popular social VR room, and there is always new things to do there. Here are some images when we went to play dodgeball and paintball, both very fun. In September, we went back to Frame VR. We have been there before, but one of the main differences were the avatars. We have legs now, and it is also connected to Ready Player Me. So you can bring in your RPM avatar in World now, which is nice. Okay, and then finally, the last trip, which was in November, we went to Roblox. And this was the first time we went there, as you will soon see when Bethany talks about the surveys for all these platforms. Roblox was one of the most popular trips this year. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bethany to talk about the research we conducted in 2023.
Great, thanks, Marie. So to get started, Marie has already recapped what we know about what educators expect from a virtual world platform if they're to use it for educational use. And before we dive into the overall impressions of the different platforms, Marie, if you could go to the next slide, that would help.
Sorry.
No worries. But I want to remind you guys that the survey questions that we ask after each visit, we refine these a little bit, but one thing that we realized as we compiled these is that not everyone who goes out for a visit completes the survey. We haven't always been really good about tracking the attendance and then seeing if it matches up to the number of attendees. But we would like to see that become 100% completion rate in 2024. We are coming up on that 5-year anniversary, and we do have some new ideas for going forward. But we'll talk about that in a moment. And as a reminder, we know that our data is not statistically significant as our sample size is too small. But we do know that this is a core group of exploders who basically go out with us almost every outing, and they've been doing that consistently for the last 5 years. So we feel like this is a great group of colleagues with a lot of expertise, and we value the findings for that reason. So let's talk a little bit about the VR, what the VR exploders thought overall about these platforms. Now, originally, we had been using Google Forms to collect data that was primarily qualitative in nature, and when we migrated to Qualtrics, we're really still trying to focus on gathering quantitative data. And again, our core group of people who go out with us do have a significant amount of experience using different kinds of platforms with different kinds of devices, and we've been returning to these multiple platforms multiple times. And most of our questions are these standard Likert scale ones, and we're asking for a rating on 1 to 5 for satisfaction with accessibility, the ease of onboarding, functionality, etc. And we added a question on what kind of device was being used as well. For example, it's not always 100% headset or desktop. Several times in our outings, people have switched between devices in the middle of things because they couldn't communicate effectively. But we're going to focus, however, on the overall ratings for different platforms for just the things that educators have told us are the most important, and that would be accessibility, the ease of onboarding, the functionality in general terms, and the ease of content creation, and a general comparison of how the platforms measure up against other platforms in terms of being better or worse. And this is just, again, in sort of a general census. So the numbers here, right here on this slide, they're again not really significant, but these are not averages, these are absolute numbers. And like I said, these are all completed surveys, which unfortunately are lower than actual attendance numbers. Nudge, nudge to anybody here in the audience that doesn't always complete a survey. The new VR Exploder interest form that we have in the Pirate's Chest does ask for people to commit to filling out the post-visit surveys as soon as possible after the visit. You know, we still can't enforce that, and you know, all these surveys are entirely anonymous, but we do hope to get more visitors and more consistent and higher completion rates. Now, Roblox had the most completed surveys, and Marie and I both think it was because there was so much enthusiasm from everyone. This was a top platform for us, and we plan to continue to investigate, but I think that was 100% completion rate. Again, we can't be sure. But this is the average response of everybody overall over the last year on accessibility across all platforms. In general, people seemed somewhat satisfied or neither satisfied nor dissatisfied with most platforms. In a way, maybe that's good because maybe it means that it's not an afterthought. You know, we are trying to evaluate these, but we're also aware that our experiences can sometimes be very individual in nature, related to our own equipment or challenges. One person can rate a platform as excellent, and someone else can be on the exact same outing and rate their experience as not meeting accessibility requirements because, for example, they might feel it was too hard to find the chat or that the chat wasn't persistent. So there are so many variables here. Hopefully by now you're getting the gist of how hard it is to evaluate these platforms. Now, this is the average responses for onboarding across all platforms. Most of the platforms we visited here were somewhat easy to get into and start doing things. We still have some outliers though. And again, we found that the experience can vary quite a bit, quite widely from among our users. And for example, we went back to ScienceSpace as a group this month because in January, we had such an incredible and positive experience. And everyone thought it was amazing in January, but this month it was awful. Everyone had terrible lag and other challenges. So it wasn't just one or two of us. So again, this is moving targets and herding cats kind of issue here. And honestly, I'm not sure that larger sample sizes is going to yield much better or more data that's more clear. So overall, all platforms were rated somewhat functional, but it's clear that with each VR Exploder outings, some of us have an easy time, and it seems like there's always one or two people with different perspectives or different challenges. And speaking just for myself here, I think this is my biggest takeaway over the last 5 years. I just don't see ever us as a group getting to a clear consensus on anything because that experience can vary so much from visit to visit. Even if I'm just looking at my own experiences, I'm consistently surprised that you think something's great and then you go back and you've got weird problems with it. So the variables on equipment used or other factors are just too many and unknown. Now this one is interesting because creating educational content is an important feature, with that being defined as having robust content creation tools that are not limited to just learning to be a Unity developer. Educators want things that are easy to import from Unity or elsewhere from places like Sketchfab. They want in-world building and presentation tools. And this slide shows that creating content was either rated somewhat easy or somewhat hard. And this points to the fact that we went to very different platforms in 2023, and we'll see when we show the data on a per platform basis, this makes some more sense because it does vary widely by platform. So here's the average responses that asks the user to compare the platform they just visited with others they've been to. Is it better or is it worse? And it looks just like the previous slide, doesn't it? We don't think this tells us much. It does seem like the grass is always greener somewhere else kind of syndrome. But in 5 years in, we're still looking for some kind of consensus here, and I'm not sure we're ever going to get to it. So one thing we noticed as we were going through these results is that there's a clear grouping of platforms here. Those that are consistently rated satisfactory and those that are not satisfactory overall. Both Sansar and Somnium Space are not among the Exploder's favorite platforms. For accessibility, they are the only platforms with extremely dissatisfied ratings at all. And Roblox is a clear winner here, as the ratings never dipped below neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. And the combination of extremely satisfied and somewhat satisfied far outweigh the neither category. And it is the highest rating for all platforms. The next best accessibility ratings go to Rec Room and Frame, both of which are very easy to use. And one, Rec Room, is highly interactive and somewhat geared towards younger players, as is Roblox. So for onboarding experiences, Roblox comes out near the top again. 89% said that it was either very easy or somewhat easy to get into and get moving. But again, there's always the outliers. 11% said it was somewhat hard. Frame VR is actually slightly better than Roblox in terms of onboarding, and Hyperworld also didn't do too badly either. Quite a few people found it very easy and somewhat easy to get in and start destroying things, but notice again that Somnium Space has one of the only two very hard ratings, and the other one is Mind Test, which is interesting because Mind Test is basically the same as Minecraft, and that's really popular with kids and educators working with kids. But at least 15% found it very easy, and quite a bit more found it somewhat easy. But there's always these outliers in our outings, and some people found Mind Test really difficult. One more thing to mention though, like Minecraft and Roblox, Hyperworld is also considered a kids teens platform. So are we seeing any patterns here yet about the platforms geared towards kids? And for functionality, Roblox and Frame VR win again. And Somnium Space loses, with a whopping 50% of exploders indicating it's extremely dysfunctional and 38% saying it's somewhat dysfunctional. Hyperworld, Frame VR, and Roblox are all showing positive responses for functionality. Hyperworld more so than even Frame VR. Hyperworld has a combined very and somewhat functional percentage of 71%, while Frame VR had a combined 75% positive rating. Roblox combined is 89% positive. So Roblox really stands out in the category of educational content creation. Even with 11% showing up as somewhat hard, keep in mind that the sample size is small, and that 11% represents a single exploder. And like I mentioned before, we go on these outings and it seems like there's always, one or two that has trouble, even if they didn't previously. And it's not the same person, I think, having the same issue figuring out how to log in or chat in World or whatever, that is. But Frame VR is the other platform that was tagged as very or somewhat easy. And again, Somnium Space was mostly rated either somewhat hard or very hard. And it seems in general for many, it may be difficult to create educational content on these platforms. None of them escaped a somewhat or very hard rating for creating content. So there's not going to be any magic bullet, I don't think. So the platform, the pattern that we keep seeing with these, these other comparisons is that Somnium Space was typically the least preferred platform in all of the categories. What we didn't point out is that Sansar also consistently hovers between somewhat better and somewhat worse. And typically the ratings are largely on the worse side. And we're not going to say anything about AltSpace because it's a moot point at this time. But while Spatial has had a larger spread of ratings between positive, neutral, negative, it had more very positive ratings than very negative ratings. On the whole, Spatial seems to be a good platform, except with regard to educational content creation, which one person said was very hard to create. Mind Test hovers between positive, neutral, and negative, and this may be due to the problem people had with onboarding. 3 out of 7 of the VR exploders who had completed surveys said it was either somewhat hard, which is number 1, or very hard. And Hyperworld is on par with Spatial. This is because it does consistently get positive ratings, but it can be somewhat hard for some categories. We do think the unconventional user interface, which caused a lot of confusion, may be the reason for these ratings. So finally, Frame VR and Roblox, they consistently came out on top for most of these categories. So the last question for the post-visit surveys asks for any additional thoughts or impressions to share about using this platform or using it for education. And we've got a couple quotes excerpted here on this slide, but Roblox and Rec Rooms were the shout outs, I think, for us consistently. Remember too, that Marie and I are on these outings with everyone for a full hour. So these quotes here, these are just little snippets that were from the survey, but we're interacting, and sorry, we're editorializing here too, because we can't help it that we're sharing the information. It's kind of a synthesis of spending time with people and listening to what people are saying. And I know that's not scientific, but I think what we're doing is as much kind of an embedded ethnography or something as is trying to gather hard data. So where do we go from here? The number of platforms to choose from is still exploding. And from what we've seen in the last few years, opinions of experience about, experience VR exploders, it varies widely from visit to visit. We don't have enough data yet, and yet we're still gathering data. We're finding it's like trying to hit a moving target, but we've got to start somewhere, because in terms of recommending platforms, I don't know about you guys, but our institutions are asking us for our guidance, and we think it's probably happening to you too. Our institutions are looking at us and insisting that we're the experts on this. So we need to chat about what we're doing at San Jose State's iSchool and at Colorado State Fort Collins before we wrap this up. The biggest issue we're facing is the iSchool right now is that Mozilla Hubs is closing down, and that's the platform that we have been exploring the last couple of years, and our students have done amazing things. And we need to expose our students to these emerging technology platforms that are impacting, the library and information science field. And an important trend, we can't ignore this, but Marie and I, like some of our VR Exploders colleagues, we think that browser-based environments are generally the easiest to learn to use with no coding skills or special equipment needed. So with Hubs shutting down at the end of May, the iSchool is pivoting to both Frames and Spatial. The news of the closure of Hubs was devastating, but Mozilla Hubs reported, and I quote, this is just for some good information, for over 5 years, Mozilla hosted services for the Hubs community to upload assets, create worlds, and host meetups. And on the demo server alone, so that's not people like the iSchool running their own servers, on the demo server alone, we see that you all have created over 100,000 custom avatars, over 200,000 scenes, and hosted meetups for close to 10 million attendees. And that represents an immense amount of creativity, innovation, and time. And like I said, that's just on their demo instance. That's not on anybody else like us who had their own instances of Hubs code. So y'all remember that AltSpace closed a couple years ago, right? And that and the Hubs thing is a lesson that we just can't have all our eggs in any one basket. So Marie continues her work in Spatial with her students, and she's in the same boat we are, and her students are have built in different platforms, and like she said, she's recommending they migrate over to Spatial, and our students have to do the same thing. We got to migrate our content, and we can't be sure what the future holds. While we're talking about browser-based VR, though, I will say one limitation with Frame that stands out for me, in direct contrast to Spatial, is the number of concurrent users you can have in your rooms, which is 8. Even with the paid version, we were just looking at this. I don't know how much it would cost us to scale up, but Spatial has a starting number of 50 people at once in your environment. So I think that's a big difference. So this fall, we'll begin celebrating our 5 years of VR Exploder outings, and based on our research and what we've learned along the way, we've got some exciting things in store this year. We want to make some changes to our survey as we go into the next stage, which is going to be to focus more intently on a targeted group of platforms. So we can't be just like going to everything that's out there. We need to finalize what are the most important platforms, go visit those multiple times, and really do a deeper dive into the functionality of them. And so the browser-based platforms of Frame and Spatial are top of mind. We're not going to, those we have to keep. And we can't ignore where all the kids are. The popularity in terms of numbers and growth, the functionality, the ease of use, make them impossible to ignore. So you've heard us been talking about Roblox, but it keeps coming up for us as one to watch. So that's one platform where we're narrowing in on, but we're also working on creating a list of essential tasks for our exploders to complete as a way to really quantify how these platforms stack up against each other. And it is challenging, but it is a lot of fun too. And we've said it before, that the expertise of desktop virtual worlds is largely missing from much of the conversations happening in the educational world today with talk about VR platforms. And we want to change that. So we hope you'll consider joining us. If you want to contribute to this research, we do have a link to join the VR Exploders in that Pirate's Chest. And but I'm going to put into the chat too, that's the form that we've got to join us. And I appreciate my colleagues Val and Sidearm mentioning about where the kids are. But yeah, those kids that are growing up in this, those are the college students and the library patrons literally right around the corner for us, right? So with that said, that's what's up with the VR Exploders. We hope you will come visit us at our exhibit cave. If you haven't clicked on it already, that Pirate's Chest note card giver will be there, along with a student created history of information exhibit. And you can learn about the avatars and identities projects. And, thank you so much, you guys, for coming. We hope we've got some time for a little Q&A. Thanks, Agile Bill. Woohoo.
I think we have plenty of time for questions, actually.
I've got a question. Sidearm here. No surprise. So, from being on your Exploders group, which I loved, I always felt like it was pretty much focused on, can you have a VR headset and can you just use keyboard? That you had to have both, and I appreciated that. Now, because of recent experiences, I'm like, can you co-create or not in the environment? So Roblox, and when I checked it out to orient a class earlier last year, I read through all of their stuff about how you sign up to create stuff and how you get money from it. I mean, our class was about virtual economies. It looked like you could readily create experiences and maybe share content in the experiences. It was a little tricky, and I was just getting the highlights. So I know you guys looked at Roblox, but I'm more interested in where are you aiming Exploders next? If you're going to aim it more at can you co-create, and let's do it. That's my question. Over.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that we're looking at. I believe that's going to be one of our tasks, right, Bethany?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. It is that co-creating and creating content. I mean, that's one of the most important criterion. So yeah, we have to come up with a really finalized list of tasks, which of course sounds like work, doesn't it? We have to go into these environments. But seriously, if we're going to actually focus on a handful of the most important things and then like produce some kind of quantitative data that says this functionality works like this one doesn't work like that, but it's good for that, right? So yeah, that is a top thing, James, and we definitely want you, Sidearm, in our, helping us with our projects.
So and the thing too is that what we want to make clear is that for this next year, we are picking only a few platforms like Roblox to go into several times, one after the other, so that we can complete the task. Because we were trying to do that. We did that with ScienceSpace so far this year. We went to ScienceSpace in January, and then we went back in just now, right? In March. That's not going to be one of the spaces that we're going to go back to, but I mean, we're looking at going maybe to Roblox 3-4 times this year and trying to finish all the tasks that we have, so that we can more definitively answer. Because the thing about jumping from different platforms every month is that we spend at least half the time trying to get our bearings and figuring out how to move around and chat and do all that other stuff, right? So now we feel like we've been doing this now for 5 years. It's time to dig deeper. Because as Bethany said, originally our hope was to find, the platform that rules them all and addresses, everything that, the perfect platform for delivering educational content. And we've come to the conclusion there is no such thing. And we should probably, stop looking, but look at the platforms that we know most people, I don't know, 500 million of them,
Yeah.
are using and will be expecting to use as they get older, and figure out what it is about those platforms that are making them that are bringing in all those people. And I think creating content together is one of those things. I think it's a big one, and the social aspect as well.
Yeah, and I just want to dovetail on what Val just put into chat, and because Val has become really, you've done a lot with Mind Test, right? And so you have a lot of expertise in that. And of course, Val's one of our VR exploders. We can't all be everywhere at once, like you said earlier. And it takes being in a place multiple times really to be in the position to evaluate it. So we've been in multiple environments multiple times, but I don't go back over and over and work in Mind Test. That's not my primary place. And Val, I would absolutely defer to what you say is like, oh yeah, sometimes people have trouble at first and blah blah blah, but then here's ultimately how this functionality works out. Yeah. Looking, what did somebody say? We're out of time? No,
we got 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So there's lots of work to do. We need more people to help us. And yeah, there's going to be more work, like to evaluate a smaller number of platforms, but really digging in deeper. And it's where the kids are, where the numbers are. We have to be ready as educators for those, right?
And I'll also just point out that it's when we went to Roblox, I took my students there. We went as VR Exploders Club, but I also have it now as one of my field trips that I take my students on, because it used to be, we used to go to AltSpace and I had to replace it. So I took them to Roblox, and again I got the same. And these are graduate students who are all mid-career guys. They're not even kids, right? They found Roblox to be the best tour that we took all semester. And yeah, Val, Vacara is definitely going to create. Bethany and I have been talking about maybe recreating the second sim see how easy it would be to recreate it on Minecraft, or sorry, Roblox. Yep. But the other one I think we want to look at is spatial, right? Because spatial, I don't know how they've done this, but they do have a phone app, and my rooms in spatial are pretty heavy content wise, and I can still go in there on my phone on the mobile app for spatial and see everything. And it might take just a slightly bit longer to res, but it does res.
Thanks again, everyone, for coming. We really appreciate it.
Yes. I think, yeah, we're at time. Be sure to click on the treasure chest if you want to join VR Exploders.
or friend us in world, we'll go to our exhibit area too.
Yeah, we have to go there
Thanks,
now.
you guys, for the comments. Thanks, Nahi. We appreciate your help.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks to our VR exploders in the audience too. We love you guys. All right.